He arrived just after dawn, the way he always did, with the first local rattling into Churchgate Station and a slim notebook already tucked under his arm. Arvind Joshi liked to walk the platforms before the flood of commuters washed through, ticking off small observations in tidy columns. A loose light bulb over platform 3, new cracks in the old terrazzo floor, a widowed pigeon nest beneath the digital clock. After 27 years as a ticket inspector, the ritual kept the city's frantic pulse from startling him. He carried a hole punch, a ballpoint pen, and the unhurried patience of a man who knew exactly how long a train would linger and precisely when a passenger was lying. That morning, something new interrupted the familiar geometry. On the western wall, tucked between the vending machine and a peeling poster of a Bollywood hero, a patch of fresh paint glowed like sunrise trapped in brick. Arvind stepped closer. The image was a dappled seahorse wearing a tiny conductor's cap, its curled tail gripping a stylized Indian Railways symbol. Around it, unfurled ribbons of color magenta, turquoise, lemon yellow, coalescing into letters that read, "Find the tide that never reaches the ocean. Look for a red kite where children trade crows for dreams." Below the line, 3 small dots had been added in silver. Graffiti wasn't uncommon in Mumbai's stations, but this piece felt curated, deliberate, almost polite. The seahorse's earnest eye seemed to greet him personally. Arvind, not usually a fanciful man, felt the oddest impulse to salute. By 7:10 a.m., the platform swarmed. Arvind clipped tickets, answered questions, and chastened a group of college boys for hanging off the doorway while the train pulled out. Still, the seahorse lingered in his thoughts. At his lunch break, between a flask of masala chas and 2 rotis wrapped in foil, he copied the line into his notebook. "Tide that never reaches the ocean," he mused. Tides implied water, but water in the city that didn't meet the sea could only be one place. Banganga Tank, the ancient rectangular pond in Wakeshwar, where legend claimed Rama had shot an arrow to summon the Ganga. And a red kite? Families often flew kites there on Sundays, the paper triangles swooping over the temple roofs while the sacred water mirrored the sky. Arvind felt a childlike surge of excitement. Could the mural be a puzzle? If so, for whom? He kept the idea to himself. His colleagues would poke fun at the senior inspector chasing street art clues like a detective in a film. Yet by evening, when he was free of uniform and responsibilities, he boarded a double-decker bus southward. The air coming through the open window bore the clotted scent of traffic and frying vada pav. But when the bus climbed Malabar Hill, a cooler breeze rushed in, hinting at the sea below. Bunganga lay quiet under flickering street lamps. Devotees had gone, only the water remained, glassy and black. Arvind descended the worn steps. There, beside the ghats, a second mural waited. It showed the same seahorse perched on the curved horn of Nandi, Shiva's bull. Beneath them stretched a lattice of red lines, like kite strings, converging on a single point, where a tiny pair of spectacles was drawn. Underneath, another riddle. Where books meet bricks and paper becomes flight, find the window that reads the wind. Arvind's heart thumped. Someone had painted this knowing he would follow. The seahorse's conductor cap was now a ticket inspector's, complete with a minuscule badge engraved with AJ. He was being addressed. 2-3 kilometers away, on the 3rd floor of a crumbling chawl in Lalbal, Riva Verma rinsed purple acrylic from her brushes, laughing to herself. She had left the spectacle symbol on the mural to confirm her suspicion. Arvind always pushed his glasses up his nose with his middle finger when he was reading something carefully. She had noticed it months ago from a distance and replicated the gesture dozens of times until it felt like a secret handshake. Riva was 26, with calloused fingertips stained permanently in cobalt and vermilion. By day, she designed banners for Gampati pandals. By night, she trespassed into the city's forgotten walls, releasing images no one had commissioned, precisely because no one had. A silent disciple of color, she felt conversations were easier in paint than in words. She had first seen Arvind while sketching commuters at Dadar. Unlike the harried ticket checkers who shouted at passengers, he inspected with soft gravitas, pausing to help an elderly woman retrieve her cane, guiding lost tourists out of the crush. His gentleness unsettled her, made her want to draw it. One evening, when he lingered on platform 6, she traced his silhouette in charcoal onto a scrap of plywood. The chalky outline stared back, vulnerable and dignified. Looking at it, she realized the drawing wasn't enough. She wanted to have a conversation. But how did one converse with a stranger housed inside protocol and epaulets? Mumbai's walls offered the answer. She would invite him on a scavenger hunt painted in plain sight, a courtship staged across the city's bones. Each mural would be a breadcrumb, each clue a stroke of color, leading him through the geography of both Mumbai and her heart. And if he followed, if he solved every step, she would meet him at the final reveal. The date she chose was Holi, 2 weeks away, the day when color itself was lawless, when strangers smeared each other and names dissolved in gulal. If ever there was a moment to blur lines between inspector and trespasser, it was then. She unscrewed the lid on a fresh can of crimson. Only 6 murals left. 3 Arvind spent the next morning at the train station's lost and found office, but his mind occupied the riddle. Where books meet bricks. He thought of libraries, but public libraries seldom had windows worth notice. Then it struck him. The second-hand bookstall under the stone arcade at Flora Fountain, where dusty paperbacks towered against the weather-worn columns of the British AR buildings, paper that becomes flight. People folded pages into paper planes while browsing, launching them when the heat grew unbearable. And the arcade's high archways created wind tunnels. After duty, he headed there. Among the vendors shouting prices for Dan Brown thrillers and exam guides, another mural shimmered, half hidden behind a stack of Malayalam romances. The seahorse balanced on a paper plane, soaring beneath flocks of migrating cranes. On the plane's wing sat a tiny ink pot, quill angled like a compass needle. Follow the nib that drinks from stone. When the mother of cities bleeds saffron at dusk, stand beneath the banyan of tongues. Arvind took notes furiously. Nib that drinks from stone. Fountain pens drank ink from inkwells, but stone implied a stepwell or a carved spout. The phrase mother of cities was an old epithet for Mumbai, which itself rose on land reclaimed from 7 islands. Saffron at dusk, perhaps referring to the gateway of India, whose basalt arches burnt orange under sunset. A banyan of tongue, the old banyan tree in Horniman Circle where office workers lunched in dozens of languages. The puzzles wove history and poetry together. Someone erudite had crafted them. Arvind felt himself walking inside a sonnet. He followed the clues to the banyan, and sure enough, on one of its aerial roots hung a small wooden plank, painted on both sides. By the light of a street lamp, he saw the seahorse again, now with its tail wrapped around a railway punch, holes scattered like constellations. Home is where the map forgets its scale. Count 7 ripples from the lion who guards the underworld, and listen for the rhyme of copper and rain. 7 ripples from a lion? He recognized the reference to the fountain at Gurgam Chowpatty, crowned by 4 stone lions. Count 7 ripples? Could it mean 7 lanes away? He traced possibilities in his head, ending at the underpass where monsoon runoff echoed like rain on copper pipes. There, in the dim alcove, glowed another mural, the seahorse perched on a monsoon cloud shaped like a lady's sandal. The puzzles consumed him, but a question gnawed underneath. Why him? He was just an inspector, graying at the temples, with more ticket stubs in his pockets than adventures in his memory. He had no illusions about being romantic hero material. Yet when he looked at the murals, he saw pieces of himself reflected and refracted through a riot of color, like the city holding up a kaleidoscope to his life. During off hours, he found himself practicing small smiles in the mirror, in case he did meet the artist and needed to appear composed. For Reva watched from a discreet perch each time he discovered the next mural. She didn't follow him openly, she trusted her riddles to lead him true, but she often arrived early, blending into the crowd with the invisibility Mumbai granted any woman carrying a large canvas bag. When she saw him jotting notes, the itch to step forward scratched her heartthrob. Instead, she tightened her grip on the spray cans, reminding herself the conversation wasn't over. After the fourth mural, though, something changed. At the site near Gurgaon, Arvind looked up and called softly into the dark, "I don't know your name, but thank you." He removed a pen from his shirt pocket, drew a small circle on his palm, and held it toward the shadows, as if offering an ink stamp back to the wall. Riva, crouched behind a billboard, felt tears prick. He had replied. She hurried home, painting until sunrise. 5. The penultimate clue led him to Mahim Creek, the marshland where the sea met the Miti River. The mural here was different, larger, curved across the concrete embankment, using tar black and sodium lamp orange instead of the earlier carnival palette. The seahorse was submerged, half shuttered, tiny air bubbles escaping its nose. It clung to a bundle of hollow reeds, shaped like a flute. Every song requires silence between the notes. Walk the bridge that divides the breath of city and sea, then wait for color to become sound. Arvind knew the bridge, the old stone causeway where fishermen mended nets at dawn. He noticed the date scrawled in one corner, Falguna Purnima, the full moon of Holi, 4 days away. Color becoming sound? He reread the line until traffic horns blurred. The festival of colors would cover the city in drums and laughter. Perhaps that was the sound she meant. So, the final clue awaited him on Holi itself. He circled the last mural with his torch. A new addition sat below the seahorse, a tiny painting of his own face rendered in 6 brushstrokes, smiling. The audacity stunned him. He laughed aloud, and the creek answered with the croak of egrets hidden in mangroves. 6 wholly dawned like an explosion. Kalbadevi lanes ran pink rivulets, rooftops shook tambourines, and every shopkeeper draped tarps over shutters to guard goods from flying dye. Arvind took the day off, for the first time in years. Dressed in old khakis, he pocketed his notebook and ventured toward Mahim. On the bridge, revelers pelted one another with lavender gulal, but he scanned the horizon for any sign. Then he heard it, the faint notes of a Bansuri flute, lilting over the din, color becoming sound. He followed the melody to a narrow wharf where fishing trawlers rocked. There, paint cans formed a semicircle on the ground, each filled with tinted water, vibrating with the flute's warble as though the liquid itself sang. Suspended above them was a fresh canvas stretched between poles, blank. A young woman stood beside it, barefoot, holding the flute to her lip. Holy powder dusted her cheeks, turquoise streaked her hair. She wore denim overalls layered with decades of splatters. When her eyes met his, they widened, but not with shyness, rather with the relief of an artist seeing her sketch take real flesh. She lowered the flute. "Inspector," she greeted, voice steady despite the quaver of the Bonsuri's last note. "You found me." Arvind's mouth formed a question, but nothing emerged. She brushed her palms over her thighs, leaving plum handprints on worn denim, and took a step closer. "My name is Riva. I've been talking to you through the walls." He swallowed. "I know. I wanted to ask if—" She trailed off, searching for a canvas of words big enough. Finally, "If you would let me paint your story, with you in it?" Arvind managed a half laugh. "After all those murals, you need my permission?" She smiled, and the city's cacophony seemed to rest briefly. "I need your collaboration, not just your compliance." He looked at the blank canvas fluttering in the sea breeze, then at the cans of colored water. "And what would I do?" "Whatever you wish. Maybe throw color, maybe play this." She offered the flute. Maybe punch holes in tickets and make constellations. He gazed at her eyes, earnest, flickering like water reflecting fireworks. For a moment, he saw the entire journey seahorse, paper planes, banyan roots collapsed into this now. And the years he had spent observing life rather than entering it burst like dye packets behind his ribs. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his ticket punch, and clicked it twice, producing two perfect circles in the morning air. Riva laughed, bright as marigold. She fetched a piece of white card, handed it to him. He punched it again and again until a cluster of tiny stars emerged. Then he held it against the sun so shadows danced across her face. "That's beautiful," she whispered. "Your turn," he said, dipping his fingers into a bowl of violet water and flicking droplets onto the canvas. The dots landed like the beginnings of a galaxy. Riva seized a brush, added sweeping arcs of emerald around them. They worked wordlessly, passengers on the same uncharted train. He, punching or sprinkling color, she, shaping it into forms. People gathered, drawn by the spectacle of two strangers painting Holi onto nothingness. Softly, Arvin began to hum a childhood bhajan. Riva followed with the flute, matching the melody. The canvas blossomed, a seahorse larger than life, wrapping its tail around a railway ticket. Below it, Churchgate Station stood not in monochrome, but as a cathedral of pastels, where trains swam like fish through coral platforms. Above, a banyan tree spread, its leaves shaped like tongues of many languages, each leaf a different shade of conversation. Across the horizon, a kite string stitched Benganga to Mahim Creek, and on the crease of twilight, a tiny silhouette of Arvind and Riva walked side by side along a platform. When the last stroke dried in the salt-tinged air, they stepped back. Applause sparked from the onlookers. Colors dripped from their arms, dyeing the water pooling around their feet. Arvin felt the weight of the city lessen, replaced by the buoyancy of a note, reverberating long after the flute stopped. Riva turned to him, cheeks splattered magenta. She traced a circle on his palm, where once he'd offered ink to the dark. "Thank you for listening." He closed his fingers over the invisible shape. "Thank you for speaking in a language I could finally hear." She held out the flute. "Keep it, in case words fail us again," he chuckled. "And if they don't? Then play anyway," she said. She lifted a packet of brilliant cyan powder, paused for permission. He nodded. With a gentle toss, she powdered his hair. He countered with a puff of bright yellow to her cheek. Their laughter spilt over the wharf, beating timpanis with the tide. In the distance, train horns layered into the music of Holi, the city announcing arrival after arrival, as though every platform now led toward the same moment. Arvin looked at Reva, at the riot of color smudging her collarbone and the grin stubborn as fresh paint, and realized he no longer stood at the edges of art or life. He had stepped inside the frame. Later, when the sun sagged and gulal dust settled on silent water, they sat on the bridge, watching fishermen row out against a tangerine sky. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he did not flinch from the intimacy of wet pigment staining his khaki. In his notebook, he wrote one last entry, beneath all the riddles. Today the tide reached the ocean. He closed the book, leaving the page deliberately unpunched, unmarked, because some tickets, he decided, were meant to stay whole. Their journey paid not with coin, but with color, and redeemed only with the courage to follow a seahorse into the heart of a city that was finally, unmistakably, his own.